If the guy who literally wrote the book telling you that Bryan Kohberger was guilty, Howard Blum, in When the Night Comes Falling, if he can change his mind and tell you that, well, maybe we all got that story wrong, then you also are allowed to reconsider whether Bryan Kohberger was guilty in the Idaho 4. Let's take a look at a recent article written by Howard Blum, the man himself who wrote the book, saying this is how Bryan Kohberger did it and why he did it, and how he's now rethinking things after watching the latest Idaho State Police document dump, all those crime scene photos that many of us were shamed about. The devil's in the details. Let's get into it. Now, first of all, I want to apologize for the horrible green gas ghosty shit around me because, well, something happened of an exciting nature for me, which is that my Seahawks have made it to the Super Bowl once again, and I'm super excited about it. But that's not the nature of this thing. But if I had a green screen behind me, this green bill and the green around my shirt would disappear and I'd look really freakish. So I'm turning it on for this one moment. Let's get into the Idaho 4 case. The whole Howard Blum situation, When the Night Comes Falling. And by the way, if you don't know, I have covered the entire book, When the Night Comes Falling. We read every single chapter of that book, and I did a commentary, an audio commentary of every chapter and what I thought about it. And holy shit, that chapter on the Corner Club. I told you when I read that chapter, everything in this case, I think, hinges around what happened in the Corner Club that night. But we'll get to that some other video, or you can go back and watch that video. For now, we're going to focus on Howard Blum's new change of attitude after the Idaho State Police forensics documents came out that showed crime scene photos, and they quickly retracted it. For those who don't know, let me break this down for you. Before we get into it, by the way, if you're not already doing so, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow this channel, because I would say that we're one of the really good channels on the Idaho 4 case, and we believe in the presumption of innocence until proven guilty in a court of law, and we believe in questioning mainstream media and their narrative on how they convict people in the court of public opinion before they ever step foot into the courtroom, as I think happened in the case of Bryan Kohberger. For those of you out there who believe no one pleads guilty to something that they didn't do, therefore this case is over because Bryan Kohberger pled guilty, that means he did it. Well, again, you need to subscribe to this channel and start educating yourself a little bit. And I'm saying that politely. Read the book Framed from John Grisham and look about why people in America plead guilty to things that they didn't do. It happens all the time. Start getting educated a little bit. And it's okay. I'll help you out. I'll lead you there. It's okay to challenge things. It's already question things. Again, let's get into Howard Blum. Howard Blum wrote a book, among other people who have written documentaries and movies and all kinds of things about how Bryan Kohberger definitely was the killer. He was definitely the killer, and he did it all by himself. Remember, he did it all by himself. He didn't have any accomplices. He said so. It was part of his plea deal. Remember? Bryan Kohberger actually said, yes, I did it, and I did it alone. That was part of the plea deal. So now Howard Blum says, well, maybe that's not true. I don't think that it's possible Bryan Kohberger did it alone. What a shock. A lot of us been saying for the longest time, there's no way in hell Bryan Kohberger killed killed 4 people in about 8 minutes on 2 separate floors of a house that was busy and full of people. There's no way that happened. But apparently, I have to have you have Howard Blum maybe tell you it's okay to question these things. So let's look at Howard Blum's new thought process and talk about some of those new details that came out of the crime scene photos and break it down in today's discussion about Idaho 4. This is from the Daily Mail, as you can see on screen. The article is titled, and by the way, written by Howard Blum, who wrote the book that you can see on the thumbnail and the book that you can see in this picture somewhere on the page. Well, screw it. There's pictures from the crime scene. Fuck it. We'll go back up to the top. Oh, I just said the F-bomb. As per my habit, when I say the F-bomb, I put on parental advisory, a warning. Parental discretion is advised. This channel is not a kid's channel. We talk about very adult things and we use adult language. And so when I drop the F-bomb, that's what I do. All right, let's get into this. What everyone missed in those leaked Idaho murder pictures that makes me fear prosecutors got it all wrong about Bryan Kohberger by Howard Blum. Now, again, I have to beat a dead horse. It pisses me off that some people in America have to have someone of the nature of Howard Blum tell you it's okay to question the official narrative. So now, today, this is the 25th of January, 2026. That was when this article came out. 25 January, 2026 by Howard Blum. Now he's saying, you know what? Maybe we got it all wrong. Holy shit. Now here's the amazing part. Howard Blum somehow is going to maintain, and I get it. He wrote a book. His reputation as hinging on Bryan Kohberger had to be the killer. So he's going to maintain, no spoiler here, Bryan Kohberger still was probably one of the killers, but he didn't act alone, and he might have been doing it just to impress a friend. That part, we might say he literally just reached back and pulled right out of his ass. Like, there's no fucking reason for that whatsoever, other than Howard Blum must maintain the fact that he wrote an entire book telling you that Kohberger did it. And so when he now questions whether or not Kohberger did it, he's going to have to come up with something like, well, maybe Kohberger didn't do it, but maybe he was helping out because he wanted to impress a friend. Make up whatever you need to hold your narrative. It's okay. Let's get into the details. All right. I'm going to read this article to you largely in its entirety, so you can see the hypocrisy, and we can also use it to bridge and talk about the details. If you haven't talked about the Idaho 4 case for a while, or if you are wondering why the fuck people are still talking about it, because isn't this guy guilty? He claimed he was guilty. Again, here's a major guilter. Howard Blum, a major guilter, one that says that Bryan Kohberger did it, and this is how he did it. He wrote a book. On Tuesday, Idaho State Police briefly released, before hurriedly removing a ghastly cache of graphic photos revealing the horrifying aftermath of the murders inside 1122 King Road house in Moscow, Idaho on November 13th, 2022. So yes, Idaho State Police dumped 2,790 something pictures on the public from the crime scene. And for the first time, many people who questioned in this case, where's the blood? Where's the bodies? I mean, there doesn't seem to be enough blood in the crime scene photos. They had a few crime scene photos that have been out there in the public for a while, and there was relatively complete lack of blood. And so a lot of people questioned the official story. Well, wait a minute. If this guy just slaughtered with a knife 4 people on 2 floors, there should be blood all over the place. After all, didn't Kaylee get stabbed something like 50 something times? Didn't Xana get killed or by being stabbed 50 something times? Didn't other victims get stabbed 20 plus times each? Wasn't there major arterial cuts? Weren't they fighting back? Wasn't there signs of defensive wounds? Didn't Dylan say that all she heard was somebody crying in a bathroom and a whisper, "I'm here to help you," but somehow didn't hear Xana right next door in a paper-thin wall screaming for her life as she fought and put up one hell of a fight, as the coroner said? There's some of us thought that story didn't make sense. How do you hear someone whispering, "That's okay, I'm here to help you," but you don't hear someone fighting for their lives, as Xana clearly did? It is clear Xana fought like a mother effer. And there was a horrific scene. And when those crime scene photos came out, while they didn't show bodies, or they did show a couple of bodies, and by the way, that's why they retracted it very quickly. There were some images that included little bits of a body in there, and I think they freaked out and they pulled the images back down quickly, and those images have not resurfaced as far as I know. So the crime scene photos are out long enough that people like Howard Blum got to look at it. We got to look at it. We got a copy of the documents. We've got all of it. We've talked about it. We've had shows on it. If you want to get details about what was in those photos, watch my Crimes After Dark replay to watch us talk about those crime scene photos. If you want to get into the graphic stuff, you'll have to join our Discord channel, because we don't put graphic things on YouTube out of respect. So you have to ask for special permission to see crime scene photos. But whatever the case may be, let's talk about how the same thing that Howard Blum is going to talk about. And yeah, I take a long time to get to it apparently today. Sorry about that. All right, Howard Blum, like I said, wrote the book When the Night Comes Falling, about how Bryan Kohberger did it. Here's what he continues to say. That was the night, November 13th, 2022, that Bryan Kohberger massacred 4 University of Idaho college students. On July 2nd, 2025, he pled guilty to the killings. Now, it's funny that Howard Blum is going to tell you flat out Bryan Kohberger massacred 4 people, while a little bit later in the same article he wrote, he's like, I'm not sure Bryan Kohberger did it, or if he did it, he didn't do it alone. But yet he's still going to lead. This is the shit that drives me nuts. He's still going to lead with Bryan Kohberger massacred 4 people, and he pled guilty to it. Yes, but then you're going to find out a little bit later in his own article, I'm not sure it happened that way. The pictures that were released by Idaho State Police, the pictures show blood-streaked walls and blood-soaked beds. It says bed streets. He's got a typo. I just noticed that. Blood-soaked bed streets should be sheets. Overturned furniture and gory handprints, all amid red drink cups, discarded clothes, and banal disarray of college life. So Howard Blum is telling us a little bit about the details and have a typo. It's okay. I get typos all the time. All right. Police have taken down the photos in the face of public revulsion and the fact that they accidentally kind of released a couple of photos of deceased victims, which they weren't supposed to do. The judge ruled in favor of the families, who said that they don't want their families, their family members' bodies shown for public consumption. And the judge ruled to keep that out of the public eye. And yet Idaho State Police accidentally released some photos that included images of bodies. And I think that's why they pulled it back quickly. All right. So the police have taken down the photos in face of public revulsion, but now they say that they'll soon reissue them after reviewing general concerns. Like, there were some bodies seen in those pictures. I, like countless others, was shocked by the barbarism. But the grisly evidence also gives away, but the grisly evidence also gives away something else, no less disturbing. Here comes the shocker from Howard Blum. For those of you who need permission from some kind of, like, if you call Howard Blum mainstream media, for those of you who need permission from mainstream media to think outside the box, here you go. I began reporting on this case in the days immediately after the killings. In the months that followed, I spent weeks in Idaho, reviewed thousands of pages of law enforcement reports, interviewed numerous officials, and even visited the small Pennsylvania town where Kohberger was born and raised. And even after Kohberger's sentencing, a startling possibility has been taking shape in my mind. What is that, Mr. Blum? While I believe that Bryan Kohberger is guilty, I have never been able to shake the long-held hypothesis that he didn't act alone. Now, this newly released evidence only bolsters that belief. Well, no shit. No shit. Many of us told you, Howard Blum, and I'm fucking thankful that you're saying it, but also fucking annoyed that you get to decide when it's okay to talk about it. We've told you for the longest time, one person can't kill fucking 4 people in 8 minutes on 2 separate floors that are fighting back, screaming for their lives and defensive wounds, and get out to their car without tracing any blood of the victims out the house and to their car and in their vehicle. And we already told you that was an impossibility. Why is it that we have to wait for you to tell us it's okay to say, you know what, that doesn't make any sense? No shit. Welcome to the club, Howard Blum. Thank you very much. Welcome to the club. Glad to have you along. And I hope that you bring the public with you, because they were waiting for you to tell them it was okay to think outside the box. While I believe Kohberger is guilty, I am repeating this. While I believe he's guilty, I never have been able to shake the long-held hypothesis he didn't act alone. And now this newly released evidence only bolsters that belief. Let's get into the details, Howard Blum. At the heart of the prosecution of Kohberger, listen, this is important. At the heart of the prosecution of Kohberger is a troubling question. Could he have managed to murder 4 students on 2 different floors during the estimated 13-minute time frame between 4:07 a.m. and 4:20 a.m. that police believe he was in the house? Fuck no, Howard Blum. That's what we've been trying to tell you. That right there is 13 minutes if you don't account. And by the way, Howard Blum's going to tell you the same shit that I've been telling you for the longest time. That 13 minutes is if you don't account for the fact that it takes time for Kohberger to get out of his car that parked at 4:07, walk down into the house, go up the flight of stairs to the 3rd floor. That takes at least a minute. So shave off a minute of the 13 and reverse it, go in the other direction, shave off another minute. So now we're down to like 10 minutes. And now you have to also factor in the fact that he didn't have any blood traced outside the house whatsoever. So he had to have disrobed or something, or put something back on after he got coated in blood. Add another minute there. Now you're getting down to 9, 8 minutes. The more you work through the logic, it is physically impossible. And by the way, if you count when the dog starts barking, when supposedly the killer exited the house, here's the part you're missing. The car doesn't drive away until 4:20. That's when we see the car drive away. So Kohberger arrives allegedly at 4:07. That's the last moment you see the headlights moving. So that's before he parked the car. So at minimum, the time frame, or at maximum, Kohberger has to park the car first, and we know it was still moving at 4:07. And he left speeding away at a high rate of speed at 4:20. That's the maximum allowed. Maximum. That's not accounting for walking. It's not accounting for, changing clothes. And it's not accounting for the fact that the dog that barks is at like 4:17, which means the murders really had to have happened between 4:07 and 4:17. That's 10 minutes. Now you shave away all those extra minutes. Now you're looking at like 7 minutes for the murders to be done. Anyone who works through the fucking logic and thinks for themselves will realize it's a near impossibility. Oh, but Howard Blum will remind us, they did some test runs and determined that it was possible. Technically. Let's hear what Howard Blum has to say about that now. Because now, Howard Blum, starting to think that maybe it's not possible for one person to do it. So maybe Bryan Kohberger did it with somebody else, because again, Bryan Kohberger had to have done it. That's a foregone conclusion. He pled guilty. Howard Blum, have you forgotten Bryan Kohberger said he did it alone? So why is it okay for you that, well, we know Bryan Kohberger did it, he pled guilty, but somehow we're not to believe him when he said he did it alone? So now you're telling us, you know, he didn't do it alone, or you highly suspect he didn't do it alone, but we know he's guilty because he said so. But he also said he did it alone. So maybe you need to rethink everything. That's what I would say. Rethink everything. Now, continuing on. The authorities in Moscow suspect that Kohberger entered the residence at 4:07 a.m. Bullshit. Bullshit, 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 bullshit. The car, anyone can do the checking. Go check it. We've got videos. We've got documents. It's in the police documents. That car was still in motion at 4:07 a.m. He could not have entered the house. The fucking car wasn't even parked until after 4:07. So wrong. The killer did not enter the house at 4:07. He was still in his vehicle. The lights on the house nearby that you can see Kohberger's car pulling into the parking lot behind the house lights up at 4:07, which means he is not in the fucking house. Bullshit. The killer did not enter the house at 4:07. At best, the killer arrived at 4:07. And I don't even think the killer arrived at 4:07. I think somebody picked somebody up at 4:07 or showed to pick them up. Shortly after the car was captured on surveillance camera shortly after, his car was captured on surveillance camera driving toward the location and left the scene at 4:20 a.m., minutes before his car was filmed speeding off. And again, 4:20 a.m. doesn't account for the fact that you got to get back in the house. So don't get mistaken that you think 4:07 to 4:20 is the amount of time that the killer was in the house. Bullshit. You have to account for a time walking to and from the car. They've even performed 2 test runs, Howard Blum said, reenacting the murders as best that they could to establish a working theory for how it could be done. But I've never been convinced. Now, funny, Howard Blum has never been convinced that Bryan Kohberger could have done this alone in the time frame that they said he did. And yet he'll still maintain, well, I still think Bryan Kohberger did it. After all, he pled guilty, but he couldn't have done it alone. Well, you're halfway there. You're halfway there, Blum. You're halfway there. I can't wait to have a drink with you when you get all the way there. I'm ready for you. For starters, I suspect the 13-minute. So again, frustrates me. I have to have him tell me that it's okay. I suspect the 13-minute time frame to be wrong. Good. It does not take into consideration the time that would have elapsed after Kohberger exited King Road after the murders, trudged up the icy slope to the car, presumably changed out of his clothes, possibly stored bloody items in a plastic bag in his trunk, started his car, proceeded down the hill, and drove away. All of that activity would have reduced his actual time inside the residency by several minutes. Yes, Howard Blum. And the funny part about it is you didn't even in your math factor in that he had to get into the house first. Fuck. You literally count the time. Well, it doesn't count for the fact that he would have to get out of his car and walk up the hill to his car. How about the fact that he has to get out of his car and down into the house as well? Factor that in. My timeline, Howard Blum says, which by the way, he hasn't factored in the fact that Kohberger has to get out of the car and go into the house. He left that part out. My timeline suggests that all 4 assaults were committed in 9 minutes, more or less. And again, that's because Howard Blum apparently didn't even factor that Kohberger has to get out of the car and go into the house in the first place. I'll concede, Howard Blum says, that a 9-minute window, and I keep telling you a lot of times, I often, if you watch my show, will say there's no way somebody killed 4 people on 2 floors at 8 minutes. I use the term 8 minutes, and many of you don't understand where I came up with the 8 minutes. That's my estimation. He's got 9 minutes. I've got 8 minutes. I count mine more because I'm also factoring in that Kohberger had to walk out of his car and get into the house. So I've got it down to about 8 minutes and maybe even less. So he'll concede that a 9-minute window might have been sufficient to kill 4 people, but likely only if the killer moved methodically from one victim to the next, making no mistakes and wasting no time. So Howard Blum, and I'm okay with this. Howard Blum is saying, look, the officials in the case, the prosecution, the law enforcement said, we did timing runs. It is possible to stab 4 people approximately 150 times, scalp them and do all kinds of horrible shit and have them fighting back. It's possible to do all that in like that little tiny window because we timed it. And as Blum is starting to think, yeah, maybe maybe I can go with you on the math being okay that you could do it that time if everything went perfect. But you know what? The grisly crime scene photos released proved it did not fucking go perfectly. It did not go perfectly. They were not all a bunch of drunk, high, completely asleep victims who didn't know it was coming. In which case, maybe it would be possible. Maybe it would be possible. Maybe. Even then, I don't think so. But it's clear that they weren't all sleeping, and it's clear that they were fighting back, and it's clear that there was a struggle, and it's clear that the rooms were a fucking disaster, and that shit went on. So it didn't go perfectly, and that's what Howard Blum is trying to tell you. I've got problems. They've got a 9-minute window, and that's if everything went fucking perfect, but it didn't go perfect. The crime scene shows it did not go perfectly. These newly released crime scene photos, in conjunction with autopsy reports that I've reviewed, suggest that this killer or killers was anything but methodical. Yeah, Howard Blum. Howard Blum has seen some autopsy reports. We have as well. We've counted the number of injuries. It's ridiculous amount of injuries. What happened in that house didn't, in my opinion, happen in 8 minutes. But that's the official story. But now Blum's telling us maybe we need to rethink it. So there's some pictures of some of the chaos of the scene. Certainly, it did not happen very, very quickly. Now he adds this gem. This was a rageful massacre. That house was a battlefield. Xana Kernodle, 20, was stabbed over 50 times, and many of those were defensive wounds. She fought for her life. That's real hard to do in 8-9 minutes because not everybody was sleeping, like they said. And yeah, there was evidence that she was standing and fighting and flailing and knocking shit over, and other people were awake and fighting back as well. So the perfect scenario that they told you in America, everybody was dead asleep and drunk and hammered, not entirely true. Yes, there was alcohol in the system. Yes, some had amphetamines in their system, but they fought back. Kaylee Gonzalez, 21, was stabbed more than 20 times. Oh, it's a lot higher than that, by the way. It's a lot higher than that. Her family put the precise number at 34. It's also more than that. She too Kaylee had over 20-something stabs in her head alone, and she had other stabs in other areas as well. So their math is way off on, or at least Howard Blum's math is way off. That was in the documents. That's in the documents. We've just recently read the whole detail of how many stab wounds, and it's well more than this. She too resisted her assailant. Yes, Kaylee had defensive wounds. Xana had defensive wounds. And his response was ferocious. So the killer, the assailant's response was ferocious. There is evidence of asphyxia injuries, meaning Gonzalez was strangled and perhaps gagged. Yes and no, Howard Blum. Yes and no. I will say that I disagree with you. What they said, what they indicated to me, and this is going to get a little graphic and a little morbid, but this is a true crime story, and you're listening to how murders were done. So if he can do it, I can do it. Listen, the documents explain that contributing factors to Kaylee's death was, so first of all, the main cause of death was sharp instrument or sharp stabbing instrument that caused her death. But contributing factors were asphyxiation and other things, blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. She could have been choking on her own blood. And in fact, by the wounds, that is exactly what it looks like happened. So yes, by the way, Steve Gonzalez has indicated the girls were gagged, or at least one girl was gagged, but multiple, there's documents that show that Steve Gonzalez said multiple victims were gagged. So, and believe me, the evidence that one or more of the girls were gagged, by the way, the evidence of more is in the documents, and it's all over the place. More than one of the victims were gagged. So now you tell me how that person gets into the house and has time to gag people, tie them up. It's not possible, folks. It's not possible to have happened the way it did. And now Howard Blum is starting to get on board with it. It's not possible. That's what he's starting to say. I never thought it was possible. I wrote a book saying one guy did it and here's how he did it. But now I'm having to tell you, I've never really thought it was possible. Then why'd you write the fucking book on it? All right. So I'm taking issues with it's not proof that Kaylee was strangled, even though he's kind of suggesting that. I think he's wrong about that, but for what it is. And there was also blunt force trauma injuries. Her nose had been broken and her face beaten beyond recognition. So what he's saying is it wasn't just a stabbing. There was other indications. He's going to point out there was other weapons that were possibly used. In fact, everyone said that. The Gonzalez has said more than one weapon was used. Gonzalez said their daughter was punched in the face. They said that there was, and at the very last minute, at the sentencing, they were still saying outside the courthouse that more than one weapon was used. And when reporters asked the prosecutors, hey, now that it's over, can you tell us what other weapon was used? And everybody, I was there in the courtroom. I'm not in the courtroom. I was in the courthouse. I was there in the courthouse for the press release afterwards, because I was actually in the courthouse also for the victim statements, impact statements. I went to the press release afterwards, in which the press asked, hey, now that this is over, the Gonzalez's are basically outside saying that there was more than one weapon used in this thing. What was the other weapon? And I watched everybody uncomfortably in the prosecution team, Bill Thompson and others and police officers look at each other, struggling with what the fuck do we say? What the fuck do we say? And then somebody came up to the mic and said, we're still going to maintain that primarily this was done with one weapon. They're still lying to you. They still can't tell you what the fuck happened in that case. Why is it, if it was just an incel who went in there and killed 4 people randomly because it was just a random thing from some Pennsylvania outsider, if that's what it is, why are we still hiding and lying to the public and pretending like you haven't told the families more than one weapon was used, but when the press asks you about it, you're like, we're still going to maintain it was basically one weapon. You're still lying about shit. What the hell are you lying about? Why can't you just tell us what happened? Why? What's the big secret? Madison Mogan, 21, was stabbed multiple times, and the exact count has not been released. Well, it has by the time. I believe he's wrong. I think the exact count has been released, or at least close enough, where they say 20 plus times here, 3 times in the back, a couple of times, or 3 times in the legs. Those numbers add up, and their math is there. So it is definitely a number that is out in the public. So I don't know if he just didn't see that article or that document released before he wrote this article. I don't know. Ethan Chapin, 20, was stabbed multiple times. Again, the precise number is not known. Well, pretty close. They got a number. And the number of stab wounds and the damage that was done, again, Xana, I hate to say it because I fear that the families are going to hear videos like these and it's going to bring back trauma to them. But Xana had wounds indicating on her back and her legs. She was standing upright. She fought, and it was horrible. Let's just say that. All right. In total, there were, I conservatively estimate, well over 100 separate knife thrusts, and there very may have been another weapon. Yes, Howard Blum, thank you for joining the group. I really do actually appreciate it. Even though it sounds like I'm being completely sarcastic, I like that Howard Blum was finally coming out to the public and saying, hey, by the way, maybe we got it all wrong. In our zeal to take the easy answer because, well, Bryan Kohberger said he did it, so that must be true. It must have happened the way he said. I told you and have been saying and continue to say that I don't give a shit what Bryan Kohberger said. It didn't happen the way he said it did. The plea deal's bullshit in the sense that it did not happen the way he said it did. And I've maintained that all along, and now Howard Blum is getting on board with that as well. State Prosecutor Bill Thompson, Howard Blum goes on to say, mused in an interview after Kohberger's sentencing that, quote, there were injuries that appeared to have been caused by something other than the knife, although it could have been the knife. So Howard Blum is saying, look, even Bill Thompson, the prosecutor, has hinted another object was used other than a knife. The Gonzalez's outside the courthouse that day said at the victim impact statements, more than one weapon was used. Many people have said more than one weapon is used, but we're still playing a game like we don't believe more than one weapon is used. I don't think we can exclude the possibility that there was an additional weapon involved, Bill Thompson also said. I don't think we can exclude the possibility another weapon is involved. Okay? So the defense, let me remind you, the defense said this crime was committed by multiple perpetrators with multiple weapons, and it couldn't have happened in the time frame it did. And yet you got Bryan Kohberger to say in a plea deal, I did it by myself, and I did it with a knife. Good for you. Doesn't match what actually happened in that house. But I know, America, people don't plead guilty to things they didn't do, so it must have happened the way that Bryan Kohberger said so. All right. And what about the DNA found on the knife sheath, Howard Blum says, also depicted in the new photos, left on the bed next to the body of Maddie Mogan. There was a speck, Howard Blum, of DNA belonging to Kohberger on the button snap. That was the unshakable touchstone of the state's case. But investigators also found something else. Now, first of all, I politely would say bullshit. It was not an unshakable touchstone of this case, you sons of bitches in mainstream media. Yes, I'm pissed. So you sons of bitches, do you not understand that DNA evidence that everybody in America became convinced Bryan Kohberger's DNA is at the crime scene? His defense said that DNA, if it even is there, was planted, and we think we can prove it, but that was never going to come out because they weren't going to have a trial. And second of all, even there's documents that even show that officials said, don't use the DNA evidence. It's tainted. It's fucked up. You can't use that in court. It'll never fly. And the prosecution said before the trial, don't worry. We don't even intend to show the DNA evidence at trial because we've got enough circumstantial evidence. So you don't understand the fuckery that's happened to America. They've convicted a man in everyone's mind across America by telling you his DNA was at the crime scene. Howard Blum will still tell you it was the unshakable part of their prosecution, and yet they never intended to show the DNA at trial because they knew it was garbage science and they knew it wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. And in fact, what did Bill Thompson say when Bryan entered the plea deal? Hippler asked Bill Thompson, I need Bryan Kohberger to hear what you would have presented at trial. And you know what Bill Thompson said? He said, I can't place Bryan Kohberger inside the house at 1122 King Road residence. Well, how the fuck can you not place him at the house, Bill Thompson, if his DNA is at the house? Because you weren't intending to use the DNA because you knew the DNA was bullshit. And yet America became convinced Bryan Kohberger was convicted because his DNA was at the crime scene. You can't argue with it, DA. You can't argue. His DNA was at the crime scene. A speck the size of that was invisible to the human eye was what they found on it. And it turned out that they weren't even going to use it in trial because they knew it was bullshit. Bill Thompson told you they can't place Bryan Kohberger inside the house. And yet Howard Blum will still tell you in his, I know Bryan Kohberger did it because the DNA of Bryan Kohberger was on that knife sheath, and that's unshakable. It is fucking shakeable. It's horse shit. It is shakeable. Now, here's the coup de grace, though, where Howard Blum lets us know that little secret that I've told you about and other YouTubers have told you about and mainstream media won't tell you about, because this is, by the way, as an aside, why the public is flocking away from mainstream media. It's why fucking mainstream media is losing their ass, because they don't tell the truth and they tell bullshit narratives to convict people, and people are starting to catch on to it. They're starting to realize that they get more truth from a YouTube channel that some people in mainstream media are trying to call quacks and conspiracy theorists. They get more truth from that because we read the documents. We show you the documents online. We break down legal documents. Mainstream media didn't tell you this, that he's now going to tell you in a mainstream media source. So here you go. Now we're finally getting to it. Another DNA report recently released by Idaho authorities, recently released after Bryan Kohberger pled guilty. Another DNA report recently released by Idaho authorities indicated that there was another male's DNA present on the knife sheath, and tests, listen, and tests determined it did not belong to the victim, Ethan Chapin, who's the only male killed in this crime, or several other men who frequented the house. Yes, Ann Taylor had a list of alternative suspects. They tested it against all those alternative suspects. It wasn't their blood. It wasn't Ethan Chapin's blood. It was male blood on the knife sheath. Listen, male blood was mixed with the victims on the knife sheath, male blood. And it wasn't Ethan's. It wasn't any of the alternative suspects. And what they don't seem to want to fucking tell you is it also was not goddamn Bryan Kohberger's blood. Bryan Kohberger was excluded as a contributor as well, which means some other male bled on that fucking knife sheath. There was someone else there at the house. Are you not listening? The people don't think anymore. Bryan Kohberger's blood was also excluded from being a contributor of the male blood on the knife sheath. But America doesn't seem to give a shit about that. Oh, well, Bryan Kohberger's DNA was on the knife sheath. A speck, basically, of a skin cell was on the knife sheath, and allegedly, but they weren't going to show that at trial because they knew they were in trouble with that DNA. That DNA was a problem, and they weren't going to show it because they had enough circumstantial evidence, like pinging off the cell tower that services the house at 1122 King Road residence, which is fuckery. You don't understand how bad you've been lied to in this case. And yeah, I'm pretty fired up. What the hell? I'm piss and vinegar. All right. So even Howard Blum now is giving you permission. Howard Blum is giving you permission now to question the official story. Gee, I, being represented on a mainstream media news article, website, but bullshit, whatever, I give you permission now to say that maybe one guy couldn't have done it in 9 minutes, and it's actually more like 8, maybe even 7 minutes. I'm suggesting that there's a problem, that there was other male DNA on the knife sheath at the crime scene that isn't Bryan Kohberger's and isn't Ethan Chapin's, which suggests that some other male assailant may have bled in that crime. We should probably think about that. Maybe we got it all wrong. Bryan Kohberger didn't do it by himself. But wait a minute, that's what Bryan Kohberger said. I did it and I did it alone. Isn't that what he said? Why are you okay accepting Bryan Kohberger's plea deal if I did it and I did it alone? Because nobody confesses to something they didn't do. He said he did it and he said he did it alone, and yet the crime scene proves it did not happen that way. That's what we're basically saying. Now, I'm not saying prove. Hints. The crime scene hints strongly. Fuck it. It basically proves it couldn't have happened the way that they said it did. So whose DNA was it? Howard Blum asks. Whose DNA is on that knife sheath? That's male DNA, and it's not Ethan's, and it's not Bryan Kohberger's. So who bled on the knife sheath? You would think that you would want to know in a crime where a guy said that he did it by himself. And what about the motive? Howard Blum's words. What about the motive? That was never established, right? The motive that most people in America got, and I realize this may be tiresome for you if you've been on this case for forever, is that Bryan Kohberger must have had problems getting laid. And he must have, maybe, we theorize, gone to a restaurant one day and seen a pretty college girl that he knew he couldn't have. Maybe he asked her on a date and she rebuffed him. And that made him super angry. So he decided one night he was just going to randomly go out and rape that girl, and got interrupted in the middle of the rape. And so therefore he took it out on Kaylee because she interrupted him in the middle of his rape, even though they've said over and over again there was no sign whatsoever of any kind of sexual element to the crime. Yet Steve Gonzalez will tell you there's a sexual element to the crime. The whole story is fuckery. None of it makes sense. And they never established any of the shit they said about Bryan Kohberger or his sexual motivations or why he picked the women. In fact, what did Bill Thompson say? We don't know how Bryan Kohberger picked the house. We now have no evidence that Bryan Kohberger was stalking any of the girls. We don't know. We can't even place Bryan Kohberger at the house. The best we can do, this is from Bill Thompson, is we can say that Bryan Kohberger was near the house. That's it. That's what they had. That's what they had on Bryan Kohberger. We could put him near the house. We can't place him in the house. We can't tell you how he picked the victims. We can't tell him why he did it. And we have no motive whatsoever. He just couldn't get laid. That's the best we can come up with. Couldn't get laid, and he was angry, so he decided to kill a bunch of women in a house that was full of cars in the parking lot. And the worst place to pick if you can't get laid, so you decide you got to kill somebody. I think he's going to mention that as well. Boy, I didn't think it was going to take me so long to get through one article. I'm just a little bit pissed off. So what about the motive? It was never established, Howard Blum says. Prosecutor Thompson admitted to the court on the day that Kohberger's sentencing that no evidence exists tying the criminology graduate student to any of the victims before the day of the killings. Listen, the lead prosecutor told you there is no single piece of evidence that links Bryan Kohberger to any of the victims in the house at all. Nothing. All you sons of bitches and Dateline NBC bullshit who put out a documentary showing that Bryan Kohberger had pictures of the girls or may have been watching them through their cameras in their house, and all of that was maybe bullshit. It didn't exist. The lead prosecutor told you there's not one shred of evidence about Bryan Kohberger knew any of the victims or knew anything about them. They never could make a single connection. And yet mainstream America kept telling you, maybe he met a girl at the Mad Greek restaurant. Maybe he was looking at photos on Instagram, but we can't confirm that that was actually Bryan Kohberger's Instagram account, but it might have been. So maybe that's what he was doing. Maybe he had photos of girls of which none of them were the victims of the house, but maybe that means that one of the girls knew somebody who was in the house, and that's close enough. And maybe he was into some kinky porn or whatever, because maybe we found something, and maybe that means that he was going to do a sexual crime, but we can't prove that either. None of that shit was proved. None of it. Not even remotely. But the court of public opinion ran with it and said, Bryan Kohberger's a stalker. He had to have Maddie. She was so pretty. But by the way, the whole Maddie story was simply, in my opinion, to shift the narrative away from who police believed was the main target, and it wasn't Maddie. They wanted, something happened in this case, and they wanted everyone in America to look at anyone other than who the real target was. And so they made up a new story. Maybe Bryan Kohberger liked Maddie because she was so damn pretty. And maybe he wanted to rape her, and he came in to rape her, and he got interrupted in his rape, and that made him furious, and he killed everybody in this complete bloodbath. Perfectly planned and done and executed flawlessly in about 7 minutes, and got out of there without any blood left behind on a random rape that went wrong or some shit. Whatever story makes you feel good at the end of the day. So Bill Thompson said there was nothing that linked Kohberger to any of the victims. There is no proof that he'd ever spoken to any of them or even followed them on social media. That's from Bill Thompson, the prosecutor. Bryan Kohberger knew dick, jack, and shit about these victims. He didn't know them. There was nothing connecting Bryan Kohberger to the girls. All that we can definitively state is that a knife sheath with Kohberger's DNA was found at the scene. Listen, all he can tell you is that a knife sheath that allegedly has Bryan Kohberger's DNA was found at the scene. And as Ann Taylor would tell you, that doesn't tell you how the knife sheath got there, nor does it tell you how the DNA of Bryan Kohberger got on the knife sheath. So yes, the only thing you've got on Bryan Kohberger is that a knife sheath allegedly was there that allegedly had his DNA on it, but it doesn't tell you how that knife got there or how the DNA got on the knife sheath, of which Ann Taylor was preparing, in my opinion, to suggest that that was planted evidence. And I believe she could have done so. But we didn't get to have a trial because somebody convinced Bryan Kohberger to plead guilty and say he did it, and he did it alone, which was a physical impossibility, and everyone in America bought it. The prosecution argued that Kohberger intent on murder, randomly picked a house at 4 a.m, but it's not enough to put all my suspicions at rest, Howard Blum says. So even though, again, he wrote this book that's on screen, When the Night Comes Following, a Requiem for the Idaho State Murders by Howard Blum, telling you, by the way, Howard Blum in here has a section about what exactly Bryan Kohberger was thinking as he worked up the nerve to do the unthinkable. I got to kill. I'm compelled to kill. I must kill. But I'm driving around the neighborhood and I'm trying to rethink it. God, am I going to be that guy? I don't want to be that. Howard Blum went through a whole psychological narrative on what Bryan Kohberger was thinking by himself while driving the neighborhood and stalking the victims and thinking about what he's going to do. And it's like, fuck it, I have to. I'm compelled to go in. And then he tells you how he worked through those nerves and went in there and slaughtered those women. And now he's telling you, you know what? I kind of don't think he did it by himself, but he still did it, I'm sure. But wait till you hear the reasons how he thinks Kohberger's involved now. And all of this is literally just pulling the shit out of your ass. All that can be definitively stated is that a knife sheath was found with Kohberger's DNA was found at the scene. The prosecution argued that Kohberger, intent on murder, randomly picked a house at 4 a.m, but is not enough to put my suspicions at rest. It would have been very risky business. Sorry, I read that twice. It would have been very risky business for Kohberger, a highly achieving scholar who had pored over crime scenes and police investigations, to settle on such a target without any foreknowledge. So what they're saying is, look, you all want to say in America, Bryan Kohberger got away with it, nearly got away with it because he was a criminology student. He was so fucking smart. He knew how to do this murder and leave virtually no trace behind. He's so smart. And yet, why then did he pick a random house at 4 a.m. full of people, tons of people in that neighborhood? It's the worst target you could ever pick. And why would he just seemingly do this at random without planning it out? Because it doesn't seem like it was planned. In fact, there's no evidence he planned. There's no documents ever anywhere that showed that he was planning it, had any kind of manifesto or bullshit like that or nothing. There's nothing indicating that. So is he really so smart? And by the way, if he's so smart, why do you take your own cell phone to the crime scene? Why do you take your own car to the crime scene? He's so, again, you want to convince people the reason why he nearly got away with it is because he's so fucking smart. But he's not smart enough that even a 12-year-old or whatever can tell you, you don't take your own phone to a crime scene. You don't take your own car to the crime scene if you want to avoid getting caught. But supposedly we believe that this brilliant PhD candidate in criminology didn't know that taking his own car and his own phone to the crime scene might be a problem. Furthermore, Blum points out, God, this is going longer than I expected. There were 5 cars parked around 1122 King Road that night, suggesting many people were inside, perhaps too many to be dealt with. Yes, 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 yes. Oh my God, dude. That parking lot was packed. That neighborhood is packed. I've driven the neighborhood. I've walked the neighborhood. And by the way, Recently, I went to the neighborhood to look at it again, and I had a chest camera in, and I got shook down by locals. I got chased out. I got told to get the fuck out of here. You don't belong here. What do you? Because you can't even step into that neighborhood without everybody being on top of you. It is a busy, packed little neighborhood. I wasn't bugging anybody. I was literally just walking the street, and I got shook down immediately. Get out of here. You don't belong here. What are you doing in our neighborhood? So you're to convince me that this random guy from Pennsylvania drove his car in there and parked and walked into the house, slaughtered a bunch of people and left, and nobody said dick about it? It's a huge, huge cluster of human beings in that area. It is a tight, tight neighborhood, packed full of people. You can't even turn your car around without doing a 3-point stance. That's shown on camera. Kohberger's car, they say, if it was his, and I don't even think it was, but if it was his, had to do 3-point stances to get it to turn around anywhere because the cars are so tight in the neighborhood. It is packed with people. Tell me that's a brilliant criminology student that picked that house. No. Howard Blum and I, or I should say I, and now Howard Blum coming into the case late, will say, you know what? Maybe there was another reason why that house was picked. Maybe Kohberger didn't pick that house randomly because it doesn't make a lot of sense for criminology students to pick a house in the busiest part of campus practically there could be in a tight neighborhood full of people everywhere. It doesn't make a lot of sense for a smart criminology student to do it. So maybe, just maybe, there was another motive for the crime. Yeah, no shit. And maybe Bryan Kohberger wasn't even the one who had the motive to kill. Also no shit. So he continues on. Entering 1122 King Road without a specific mission fixed in mind would be the height of recklessness. But Kohberger's is a calculating, not impetuous. So and again, I love how he tells us Bryan Kohberger's demeanor. Bryan Kohberger is calculating. But he also admits that makes no sense because going into a house at 4 a.m. in a crowded neighborhood full of people and a bunch of cars outside, indicating that the person you want to rape is probably around a bunch of people, would be impetuous. So how do you simultaneously tell us, Howard Blum, that Bryan Kohberger is calculating, not impetuous, and then say that this is what he did? My theory, Howard Blum now corrects himself, my theory is that there was indeed a clear motive. It just wasn't Kohberger's own. Oh my God. Oh my God. Now here is where I'm going to have to try to like duct tape my head to keep it from fucking exploding. Because what Howard Blum is going to tell us now is, well, Bryan Kohberger clearly was there. He said he was there and he said he did it. So therefore, he must have done it. But since I can't think of a motive for it, the motive wasn't Bryan Kohberger's motive. It was somebody else. And Bryan Kohberger must have done it because he wanted to impress a friend. That is the epitome of, I'm just going to pull something out of my ass so that my book doesn't get destroyed that said, this is why Bryan Kohberger did it, and here's how he worked through all the psychological problems and convinced himself to go into the house, because all of that is horseshit now if he didn't do it or if somebody else did it. So it has to be Bryan Kohberger still did it, but he was trying to impress a friend? This is as horseshit as Bryan Kohberger must have seen a girl at a restaurant that he thought was pretty, so he decided he had to kill her. But this is how we work in mainstream media. Kohberger, in my opinion, Blum goes on, likely had hooked up with someone who, for whatever hellish reason, wanted at least one of the students dead. There you go. There you go. Howard Blum now gets to pull out of his ass that Kohberger must have hooked up with a friend, somebody. For whatever reason, that person wanted one of the girls dead in the house. So why? Oh my God, people, why is this allowed to be okay for him to do? I hope that you're all calling him. I know that my community, I'll tell you that my community that watches The Devil's Advocates will tell you, Howard Blum, you can wipe your ass with his book. It's junk. But mainstream media, people like Dateline NBC and other documentaries had Howard Blum on every fucking documentary about Bryan Kohberger and brought him on as a star part of their documentary. Howard Blum is in multiple documentaries talking about the book he wrote, saying this is how Bryan Kohberger did it. And now Howard Blum has the audacity to tell us, after all of those documentaries convicting Bryan Kohberger in the court of public opinion, that, you know what, actually probably somebody else had the motive to kill one of the girls in the house, and Bryan Kohberger was just there to impress his friend. Are you fucking kidding me right now? So my theory is that there was indeed a clear motive. It wasn't just a random act, as I wrote in my book, that there was a clear motive, and it wasn't Kohberger's motive. Kohberger, in my opinion, likely had hooked up with someone who, for whatever hellish reason, wanted at least one of the students dead. Eager to win over a new friend, and apply his morbid book knowledge, Kohberger, I believe, tagged along. You are insane that this is okay for you to say. I'm an asshole when I come up with really, really good questions about the official narrative. But you're allowed now to just say, with no receipts whatsoever, no receipts, I think Kohberger now must have had some friend who wanted to kill one of the girls for some reason that we don't know. And that Kohberger must have been really wanting to use his book smarts to help out and impress his friend. That every part of that sentence and that paragraph in this article, you literally just pulled out of your ass. And yes, okay, not literally. Okay, not literally. I guess I'm not using the term literally, because literally he didn't pull it out of his ass. Figuratively, he pulled it out of his ass. How about that? Figuratively, he pulled it out of his ass. And again, I get shamed all the time for coming up with really good receipts on the document saying it couldn't have happened this way, but he gets to say, well, now here's how I think it happened. Maybe he met a friend. And I'm convinced now that that friend must have wanted one of the girls dead, and Kohberger must have wanted to impress his friend. And so he used his book knowledge to impress his friend. And that's why Bryan Kohberger really is guilty and should be rotting away in prison as a guilty party, because he was there, but he wasn't the only one. So we're going to continue with this article. It's almost done. We're really near the bottom of the article, but one has to ask, if Howard Blum is correct, if I'm correct, if other people are correct, Bryan Kohberger, if he even did it, now Howard Blum says he knows, he's convinced Bryan Kohberger did do it with someone. But if we say maybe Bryan Kohberger did it, but he certainly didn't do it alone, if all of us are collectively saying this crime was not done by one person in 8 minutes or whatever the fuck you want to say it is, when are they going to do something about it? Are we going to continue to have people in America tell us, well, he pled guilty to it and he said he did it, so it must have been that way? Now, we're going to add with one last piece because I want to address it on the way out. Finally, there's one last piece of unexplained evidence that has always weighed on my mind. On the night of Kohberger's apprehension at his parents' home in Pennsylvania, he was led in handcuffs to the back of a police vehicle. Before the car drove off to the state police barracks, he reportedly asked a single question: was anybody else arrested? At the time, his concern was attributed to the worries of a son and a sibling, anxious to know if any of his family had also been taken from their home in the middle of the night. When illuminated by fresh light into the newly released evidence, a more ominous question surfaces. Is there another King Road killer still out there? Now, whether or not Bryan Kohberger said the infamous words that get repeated over and over and over again, which is that upon his arrest, Bryan Kohberger allegedly said, has anybody else been arrested? Many people believe that's what happened. A reporter actually said it. I think people have told me Brian Enton was the one that actually said that attributed thing. I watched a reporter say it. I don't remember that reporter being Brian Enton, but then again, it's been a long time since I've seen that. I saw the reporter who said Bryan Kohberger's words to police were, has anybody else been arrested? I saw that. So I know it was said by someone. Now, I know that we have people on my channel, for example, who say they don't believe that Bryan Kohberger ever said it. And the entire source of that false statement about has anybody else been arrested came from a reporter who just made that shit up. So whether it was said or not, Howard Blum thinks that it was said. Howard Blum thinks that it was reported and is true. That's what Howard Blum thinks, that Bryan Kohberger asked if anyone else was arrested, indicating to him, Howard Blum, that what that might mean is the same fucking thing that I said it might mean years ago, which is maybe he's saying, maybe I was there, but I wasn't the only one. So have you arrested all the other people that were involved? That might be what he's saying when he says, has anybody else been arrested? Because more than one person did it. And maybe Bryan Kohberger was there. And maybe if Bryan Kohberger was there and he knew that he was there and he knew that they were going to pin it on him, realized he was fucked. At some point, he has culpability. He knew about or was there. That's the logic. And did that lead him to finally cave and say, screw it, I guess I'll plead guilty because I was there and I had a part of it, but I didn't act alone, but I'm not going to rat people out. And some of you think, oh, well, why didn't he just rat people out? Because then he would have walked free. No, not necessarily, especially if Kohberger actually took part in it, was just one of multiple people, then he doesn't get to just walk free because he says, oh, here's other people who did it. So what's the point of telling on other people if you're still going to go to jail for the rest of your life? So there are many scenarios. And all I'm asking people in America who haven't done so yet is to open your minds and realize that they are still to this day lying to you about the case. They are still hiding details about the case. And as more and more documents keep coming out, little by little, trickling into the mainstream media, and to the public conscious, we are still starting to realize the story that was told is not correct. It is not possible. Those crime scene photos make it nearly impossible to have happened the way that Bryan Kohberger said it did. So why are you, America, as my final thought, willing to accept Bryan Kohberger must have done it? He said he did. And you don't accept the fact that Bryan Kohberger also said he did it alone, and the facts don't bear that out to be true. Even Howard Blum, who wrote the book on Here's Why Bryan Kohberger Did It Alone and Here's How He Did It, is saying, yeah, I don't think it's possible. He didn't do it alone. Stick that in your loose leaf pipe and puff it up for a while. Have a good day.